Hello, and welcome to another Behind the Poem story. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about one of the poems from Coffee and Paper Cuts, which came completely from my mind, but also was an attempt to push and challenge myself. It was an expression of a feeling I'm sure we've all had. Cumulative effect is obviously an idea that is explored in research and studied in sociology, psychology, different sorts of scientific endeavors in order to measure the effect of things over time. And as I have said before on some of these videos, all of the poems that were written in here were written over the past couple of years, or almost all. And cumulative effect was an expression of the frustration at all of the things happening in 2020 and 2021 that built up and built up and built up until we were all pretty much ready to explode. The strange sights that we would see, the crazy news stories, the crazy stuff coming out of various different politicians in various different countries. There was obviously an online sort of revolution with poetry and open mics and communicating poetry. There was also a little bit of an online revolution for programs like Zoom, like Teams, like a renewal of Skype and a variety of other video programs that allowed us to stay in touch with family when we felt and discovered that it was probably the one thing that we couldn't live without during a time when we were all expected to stay indoors. In terms of my own experience with that, I live 3,500 miles away from my family, and I needed to know that they were okay. So ironically, we started video chatting once a week, which was more often than we'd ever exchange phone calls or even emails during most of the time that I've lived in England. So I became closer and more informed about what was happening day to day than I'd ever been before. So it's not something I was willing to let go once the pressure of lockdown eased off. But one of the ironic things that came out of that happening was not only that I became more comfortable and confident doing these kind of explanatory videos of my poems to kind of promote my first book, Between Hindsight and Foresight, it also helped me become more confident with these videos and with being able to arrange and organize my own family time with the videos and friends so that I could stay social and sane during a time when we were all kind of trapped in a box, to the point where I actually didn't feel like it was impacting my life in a negative way. I actually felt like because we were all forced to access each other this way, it was better. The downside on the initial videos, though, was obviously the time limitation. Now, if you had the free version of the program, sometimes you had to stop at 45 minutes and maybe create a new meeting or schedule something else, or kind of pay for a top-up sort of thing. And there was a point where every time we'd get to the 2-minute warning, every time I'd get just shy of the free time length on the video chat, somebody, whether it was friends or family or even, colleagues that I was working with to try and coordinate the online lessons, everybody would be like, oh, and one more thing. And then we'd have to quick kind of shove in one more thing or 5 more things into that last minute and a half so that we didn't have to go to the trouble of adding some more time, adding a new meeting, sharing the link, doing it all over again. And it reached the point where I was like, you know what? I've had enough. And I understand that that's the concept. I understand that that's why programs want you to buy the full version, is so that you don't have those limitations, but so that they are properly compensated for this thing which connects all of us. And I went ahead and I bought the full version because I was so tired of just one more thing. Some people might be into cop shows or into the history of cop shows, or old enough to remember a show called Columbo. And he was kind of famous as a detective for putting suspects at ease and playing this doddery old man who was very scatterbrained and and lighthearted, and seemed like he was completely accepting the lies that they were handing him. And then right before he would go out the door, he'll go, oh yeah, and one more thing. Can you explain just this one more thing for me? And it was always the zinger. It was always the thing that was going to trip them up and trap them into incriminating themselves. And that reminded me so much of the bit towards the end of a call that was only supposed to be 45 minutes, is where everybody goes, oh, and one more thing I have to tell you. Oh, and one more thing before next time. It became kind of crazy. And cumulative effect starts with that idea. Cumulative effect is something that is not a new feeling or a new experience, but it became more prescient during this time when everything was kind of packed in and everybody was trying to tick off the to-do list faster than anything else. Cumulative effect is that it also plays on that old idiom about the straw that broke the camel's back. We were all under a lot of strain. We were all under a lot of pressure. And that cumulative effect, that first verse, which I can read to you, is an attempt to kind of sum up the whole idea of the poem. It's like, there is a point we all must hide, where our phone packed up and died, where our laptop fritzed and cried, where someone stole and cheated, lied. There is a point where one more thing is one thing too many. And the rest of the poem kind of continues on with this whole concept of just getting pushed just that little tiny bit over the line. Now, I kept the rhyme scheme very simple because it is such a universal concept, because it is so well known, this straw that broke the camel's back concept. I tried to avoid using that idiom, that cliche, because I think that cumulative effect is much more accurate to the feeling I was going for, because it wasn't just about the last thing being the last thing. It was about the cumulative effect of all of those last things over and over and over again that built up and put so much pressure on all of us to deal with that happening, to deal with, all of the things that we had to do. And we all wondered what we had done with our time when we didn't have to slow down. We all wondered how we fill that time when we can't go anywhere, where we don't spend 3 hours commuting, or an hour each way, or half an hour each way commuting. What do we do with that extra time? Do we learn a new language, learn how to bake bread? Do we keep in better touch over the phone or video conference with people? We were now in a confined space, and we were now completely kind of locked in with people that we'd seen for varying different times of day. As a teacher, obviously, I taught students. They had 6-hour-long lessons, a half an hour break, half an hour lunch. So I was seeing the same group of teenagers for 7 hours a day, every single day. And my colleagues, same thing. You're in the same place, you're in the same bubble, the same building for 7 hours a day. And then you go home and you see a different group of people. Or on the weekend, you see a different group of people, but it's all in smaller chunks. When we're in a house with our spouse or our children, our families, even in my case, our pets, and, there's no change, there's no shift, there's no different events, nothing comes up, there's no more one more thing from 5 different directions. It's all one thing, all like compressed, almost like a pressure cooker. And so cumulative effect came from all of that, came from that concept of rambling, that I'm doing now, that concept of simplicity, of having had enough. Different people reached that had enough point at different moments. Some people reached it by the first week, by the first month, by the first 6 months. Some people reached it by the second lockdown, or by entering year 2 in the 3rd lockdown or 4th lockdown, the 2nd variant or the 4th variant. Some people reach their limit at different points, but almost everybody I know, to some degree or other, reached their limit. And I think we need to give ourselves permission to admit that limit. Now, cumulative effect has a couple of plays on words, a couple of just exasperated expressions of frustration, but the rhyme scheme is very simple to try and stick to that simple idea. And when I read it, I try to show that anger and aggravation, that frustration, that pressure. Some of it brings laughs when I read it out at open mics, and some of it should bring laughs. But I have never been very good at kind of belly laugh sort of poems. There is always kind of an edge when I do sarcastic poems, or when I do poems that I have heard people laugh at bits and pieces of them. But Cumulative Effect is one of those that it was more like a kind of an sympathetic laugh of like, yeah, I've been there. I know how to, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. This kind of like, enough is enough. And so on that note, I will finish my story and finish the source so that you can not listen to me say, and one more thing, because, and one more thing, what I'd like to leave you with is gratitude for watching and enjoying these videos, sharing them with anyone that you might, that you think might enjoy them. If you are interested, my links on the description will send you to my social medias and events and ways to acquire my work, should you wish to do so. Thank you for listening and supporting my work. I hope you've enjoyed the story behind the poem, Cumulative Effect. Good night.